We're jumping back in, reviewing some of the classic heavy mechs in Battletech. I'm focusing on, for the battle value, for the new players, what I call trooper mechs. These type of mechs are machines that just excel. They're just solid. We all have our favorite machines. We have some machines that have quirks or do something special or different. But if I don't know the mission, if I don't know the map we're playing on, if I don't know what my opponent's bringing, these mechs form a solid anchor. And in your miniature collection, your Battletech collection, of course, we're going to build out, we're going to expand out. But having a staple of trooper mechs, I think, is very important for you to have that solid anchor and then, of course, build forward. So with that, looking at some of the heavy mechs, because yes, they're solid trooper mechs, but we want to be very certain of how to utilize them tactically because you're paying significant battle value. With the Orion, 1429. So let's round that up, 1500. Of course, you can adjust that up or down depending on pilot skill and tweaking ammo and stuff. But that's vastly different than taking a light mech. In a medium-sized game or a lance, what you're going to find is a lot of your battle value is wrapped up in the heavies. And that's okay, but we want them to be out there earning. Now, we've got that framework. Let's look in at the weapons profile. Autocannon 10, LRM 15, 2 medium lasers, and an SRM 4-pack with 10 heat sinks. So we have a machine that the engine can power it at a decent speed. It's not overly fast. It's not overly slow. It's kind of within that band for heavy mechs. It's got solid armor, but the weapons, we need to have that discipline with the heat sinks. That's the first thing coming in as a new mech commander, issuing those orders, or a mech warrior. You got a ton of weapons. You're looking through the tech manuals. You got a ton of weapons. Having that fire discipline and knowing when to push and hold is very important. Now, with the Orion, the 10 heat sinks I find is manageable if we can keep it tactically within range bands. And as we cross over, knowing when to jump from one to the other. We're going to talk about engagement in a second. We'll sidebar to that. We begin that Autocannon 10 and that LRM 15. Those two work really well in tandem. You've got reach. You're going to reach out. I could do the indirect fire if it presents itself with the LRM 15, but it's not an indirect fire mech. I'm not hanging back, hiding behind a hill, unless there's an extremely good tactical reason, and just plinking away to be annoying with that LRM 15. That's not utilizing the armor. That's not utilizing the weapons profile of this machine. Vastly different if we're looking at an archer. Vastly different, even though it's a weight class up, looking at a longbow. So we do have the indirect. If I can do it, city fight, city tech as I'm moving around, yes, I'll take the shot. But ultimately, I'm looking, as soon as we're in range, if I've got that target, I'm going to start firing with that Autocannon 10 and that LRM 15. Now, the 15 pack, right, of course, look, I want 20 packs. I want this. I want to pay no battle value. I want tons of armor. I want it to be fast. The 15 pack is good for a heavy mech. For me, personally, I would like the 20, but the 15 is acceptable. As soon as we jump down to a 10, yeah, okay, that's good. Or a 5, I find, even though you've got the Grasshopper, other machines that mount that, it changes the role, it changes the configuration. With the Orion, with the 15 pack, that has just enough of a spread. If I roll average, it's going to do some good damage. If I roll legendary, of course, it's going to push that damage to the height. What this means is I have the ability to hit you with a solid hit, that Autocannon 10, and a spread with the missiles. That's interesting against medium mechs, because now I'm going to soften up a bunch of areas. Against vehicles, I've got that long-range spread. I'm going to try and start hitting some motive hits. Against heavies and assaults, the missiles, you'll eat the missiles. You can absorb it. But that 10, that Autocannon 10 hitting you, 10 shot, 10 shot, 10 shot. If I can hit 2 or 3 or 4 shots before we close, that's got some bite. So you've got that long-range game. You've got that nice mix in there. Well, now we're closing, right? We're closing. The Orion, we want to utilize that armor. As we close, we've got that Autocannon 10, But now we've got 2 medium lasers. And that has the duality of being able to zap you twice with 2 medium lasers. That's going to start to push the heat, develop heat as we're walking. I'm going to need to be mindful of other weapons. And then when we close, now I've got the short-range missile 4-pack. I'd like a 6, but again, for like the 15, that works. We need to have those concessions where we can still push out good damage, but at the same time, have a little bit of a punch. So what we have is kind of a long, medium, short-range game. With the Orion, this means that there's a duality. If I find myself in that situation, I can play it. Meaning if I happen to find myself going up against another long-range mech, look, I've got some firepower, right? I've got an answer for a situation. But now, since I have all 3 of those range bands, the target that I'm going to be looking to engage with this machine means if you're at long range and you want to stay at long range because you're trying to survive or you don't want to close, I've got stuff to hit you. If you're a short range mech, I've got stuff to hit you at long and medium range. Then I can hold my own at short. So I'm looking to engage possibly with my lance this idea of what is the disadvantage for you? What is the disadvantage for the target? Range band, I want to be at that. But being a trooper mech means wherever I find myself, on whatever map, on whatever mission, I've got some dice answers for that. And I've got at least 2 weapons in each range bracket. Now, going back to 10, heat sinks. We see a lot of this with the early design mechs. You know, you got the base fusion engine and you got to figure the rest out. So generally, I find myself with the Orion, I'm never really running. Running and walking, the difference in movement, yes, but also in heat. So that first round, breaking out of my deployment zone on the hex map, there's no targets in sight. Yeah, I'll run. We'll try to get up there. But then I want to start to walk. And I'm looking for places on the hex map where I can pause, maybe get some cover, so I can walk, be firing, pause, camp, fire, 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 fire. Now I'm cutting down no heat. It's just the heat of the weapons. And if I can maintain that, I can maintain a pretty solid level state of fire. And again, the idea is I'm not blasting everything in one single turn, but every turn I've got 2 or more weapons consistently firing at you with that armor that I can take a couple of hits back. That's the power of the Orion. Now I also have, before I turn it over to my fellow Orion mech warriors, if it was good enough for the main man, it's good enough for everybody else. And I actually have 2 Orions in my collection, and I regularly play the machine. You do also kind of have the Alpha Strike. You're going to push that heat like crazy. The Alpha Strike in Battletech, the sidebar, is essentially you press all the buttons at once. I'm going to fire all of my weapons at a target with the idea of massively crippling it or destroying it. Now, it's not as easy as just mashing the buttons. There is a little bit of tactica there in that I'm going to push that heat, so I'm going to be navigating those effects, those penalties, maybe even a possible shutdown. And if that happens, what else is around me? Also, do I have a reasonable chance of destroying or crippling that mech? If it's a fresh machine, I'm not going to do anything. If it's taken a couple of hits, if it's a light mech that's taken 1 or 2 hits already, then that Alpha Strike has the potential to destroy it. I might take it. The Alpha Strike I find with the Orion would be firing that autocannon, the medium lasers, the short-range missile, because I want to get all of them in effect. If I'm that close to be utilizing the short-range missile pack, that probably means my LRM is under the minimum, so there's going to be some penalties there. I might still fire it, but I need to kind of look from that perspective. So you also have that for when the opportunity presents itself, but this is why we started with 10 heat sinks. You've only got 10 heat sinks. So there's some variables that you have to be aware around you while you're also utilizing this mech. So turning it over to my fellow mech commanders, what orders do you issue for an Orion? What kind of lance works well with that? And of course, as a mech warrior, if you're piloting an Orion, you've got a heavy mech, but that comes with heavy responsibilities. What does that tactica look like on the table?